The origins of the 1993 film Tombstone actually go back to Kevin Costner, who had just completed Oliver Stone's JFK and The Bodyguard. When he was asked what he wanted to do for his next movie, Costner said he wanted to do a Western about Wyatt Earp. Kevin Jarre, who had written Glory, wrote an epic story about Wyatt Earp and the gunfight at the OK Corral. He had Kevin Costner in mind while writing the screenplay. Kevin Jarre originally wrote Tombstone for his girlfriend actress Lisa Zane, the sister of Billy Zane, and he wrote the character of Josephine for her. Jarre wanted to write the most historically accurate movie about the gunfight at the OK Corral. Jarre contacted Kevin Costner and asked him to play Wyatt Earp, and Costner agreed. However, Costner and Jarre began to clash over the direction of the film. Jarre wanted an ensemble movie that focused on Tombstone, while Kevin Costner wanted to do more of a character study on Wyatt Earp going back to his childhood and his time in Dodge City. As they were clashing and arguing, Kevin Costner heard that Lawrence Kasdan was making his own Wyatt Earp movie and joined Lawrence Kasdan's project. While looking for a distributor, the production met with Disney, who agreed to distribute the film on the condition that Kurt Russell be hired as Wyatt Earp. Kurt Russell read Kevin Jarre's script and was very impressed. He loved the fact that Wyatt Earp was not a straightforward hero, but a complex character who was motivated by money. Originally, the producers wanted to use the actual town of Tombstone to film their movie. However, they determined that it would cost over $2 million to do this. It would have been much cheaper to build a fake tombstone nearby. The set for Tombstone was built in the countryside of Tucson, Arizona, 70 miles from the real Tombstone. From the beginning, they wanted this film to be very iconoclastic compared to the typical westerns of the time and wanted the movie to look like true history of the Wild West. For example, most old photographs depict the Wild West in monochromatic sepia tones. This made people incorrectly think that the Wild West existed in dull grays and browns. Therefore, most westerns incorrectly depict the Wild West as existing in gray and brown earth tones. This was because of the limited technology of photography that was unable to capture the true vibrant colors of the Wild West. In reality, the Wild West was very colorful and people wore very bright, vivid fashions. Another inaccuracy of Hollywood depictions of the Wild West is that everything looks old and empty like a ghost town. This is because we are seeing those old ghost towns 150 years after they've been abandoned. In reality, the towns and buildings of the Wild West were new, clean, and beautifully well decorated. They were also busy and thriving with activity. Kevin Jarre and the producers wanted to capture the authenticity of the colorful clothing and the clean, well-decorated buildings. One of the successes came by a happy accident. When Kevin Costner left the Tombstone movie for Lawrence Kasdan's Wyatt Earp movie, he saw the other production as a rival. Costner decided to stick it to Tombstone and make it difficult for them by hiring every Western costume designer in Hollywood. This worked in the short term, and Tombstone was unable to hire any costume designers. Therefore, they had to go to a new costume designer in England. The British costume designers were not accustomed to making traditional Hollywood Western outfits and just made cool new suits and costumes to the filmmaker's specification. Therefore, the clothing worn by the characters in Tombstone did not look like traditional Hollywood Western clothing, but rather looked new, sharp, and crisp. It gave Tombstone a look that no one had ever seen before in a Western, and ironically was more accurate to history. For the role of Doc Holliday, the studios originally gave the role to Willem Dafoe. However, the studios worried that if they hired William Dafoe, who had just filmed The Last Temptation of Christ 4 years earlier, the distributors might refuse to distribute this film. To prevent controversy, they decided not to use William Dafoe. They settled on this fairly unknown actor named Val Kilmer. It ended up working out well, but at that time, no one could have predicted it. Val Kilmer wanted his Holiday to capture his Southern aristocratic roots. Kilmer called his friend, who was a dialect coach, and they came up with the slow Southern drawl of an aristocrat from Georgia. Slowly, the character of Doc Holliday began to form. For the role of Josephine Marcus, Kevin Jarre wanted his girlfriend Lisa Zane, since he wrote the part for her. However, the producers were already having clashes with Kevin Jarre and worried that casting Lisa Zane for a main role would give him too much power on the set. They vetoed her casting, and Dana Delaney was cast. For the Earps, Bill Paxton was cast as Morgan, and Sam Elliott was cast as Virgil. Michael Biehn was hired as Johnny Ringo, and Powers Booth was cast as Curly Bill Brocious. The two drove to the Tucson, Arizona set together and became friends during the drive. This created a sense of closeness that translated onto the screen. In the movie, Johnny Ringo is very skilled at twirling his guns. Michael Biehn wanted to be able to do it on screen and practiced for hours a day. The scene of him twirling the guns is hours of practice paying off. An odd thing happened on set. All the cowboys associated with each other, while the characters of Earp's men hung out together. Even cowboy actor Michael Biehn and Morgan Earp actor Bill Paxton, who were friends having starred in 5 previous movies together, hardly associated on the Tombstone set. This may have created the sense of a lack of familiarity that also translated onto the screen as strangers and even enemies. Western film legend Robert Mitchum was cast as the cowboy patriarch Newman Clanton. However, Robert Mitchum injured himself while riding a horse during pre-production. They wrote Newman Clanton out of the movie, but used Robert Mitchum as the narrator at the beginning of the movie. Jason Priestley, who was already hot from his series Beverly Hills 90210, was cast as Billy Breckenridge. Many character actors in Tombstone would later go on to become famous. Billy Zane was cast as actor Mr. Fibian before his iconic role in Titanic. Thomas Hayden Church, who played Lowell on Wings, was cast as Billy Clanton. He would later play Sandman in the Spider-Man franchise. Stephen Lang was cast as Ike Clanton before playing the villain in the Avatar movies. Michael Rooker was cast as Sherman McMasters. He would go on to play Yondu in the Marvel movies. Billy Bob Thornton was almost a complete unknown when he was cast as Johnny Tyler. Tyler had no dialogue in the script, which only described him as a bully. Every line that Johnny Tyler spoke was ad-libbed by Billy Bob Thornton. Hollywood legend Glenn Ford was originally cast as Marshal Fred White. However, he became ill and could not be in the movie. Another Hollywood legend, Harry Carey Jr., came in and filled the role of Fred White. This movie features a real-life descendant of the Earps. Glenn Wyatt Earp III was the 5th cousin of the real Wyatt Earp. He was cast as Billy Claiborne. For the credits, he dropped the Glenn and is simply credited as Wyatt Earp. While filming, it was clear that Kevin Jarre was in over his head as director. He was having trouble controlling the set, and he was insisting on filming in an epic style that was going over budget. He was getting very behind schedule. Jarre also had a my way or the highway attitude on the set and refused any input from the actors. Originally, Kevin Jarre wanted to film Tombstone to look like an old John Ford Western movie. He wanted to use an old-fashioned tripod for the cameras and film long, wide shots. This was a style not used in Hollywood for over 40 years. Veteran actors like Kurt Russell, Sam Elliott, and Michael Biehn kept suggesting he film close-up shots, otherwise known as coverage. However, Kevin Jarre refused. 4 weeks into production, the actors knew that Jarre was a terrible director. A few of the actors tried to help him and had an intervention. However, it was too late, and he was fired by the financiers that Friday. Kevin Jarre actually filmed 2 weeks' worth of footage. However, much of what he filmed was deemed unusable. One of the few scenes that they filmed was the scene including Charlton Heston, which he filmed first. In Kevin Jarre's film, Heston would have had a much more prominent role. Suddenly, the cast and crew found themselves with no director. For a while, the cast and crew continued to shoot the film much like a sports team might continue to practice and play the game if their coach was suddenly gone. Kurt Russell took the lead and did much of the filming himself. The rest of the cast, who were all experienced professionals, just continued to work and film the movie. For director, Sylvester Stallone recommended George Cosmatos, who had directed Rambo 2. Cosmatos was a technical craftsman known for coming in and saving troubled production. He was very good at allowing the star to direct the movie and execute his vision, while he himself completed the more boring and technical aspects of directing. George Cosmatos was hired as the ghost director. He could give the film project a directorial figurehead to take a lot of the heat off of Kurt Russell. Director Cosmatos and Kurt Russell wanted this movie to be an ensemble film. At the center of this movie was the friendship between Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. This was different from the way these two are portrayed in past Hollywood movies. Other films have the two end up in conflict with each other. However, in reality, Earp and Holliday remained friends, so this movie is more accurate to history. Immediately, everyone knew that Kevin Jarre's script was way too long and essentially unfilmable. In Jarre's original script, there were more subplots. The relationship between Wyatt Earp and the cowboys were more complex and nuanced. All the women had more prominent roles in the story. One of the producers of Tombstone was Hungarian producer Andy Vanya, who had produced First Blood and Rambo First Blood Part 2. Andy Vanya is supposed to have single-handedly saved Sylvester Stallone's First Blood movie back in 1982. When the first cut of First Blood was made, it scored very poorly with audiences. Andy Vanya re-edited First Blood and turned it into the fast-paced crowd pleaser that made it to the theaters. Andy Vanya had a knack for editing slow and convoluted movies and finding the simple and entertaining core of the film. He saw the core of Tombstone to be a revenge film. The first half would build up to the murder of Morgan Earp, and the rest of the movie would be about avenging him. In keeping with the theme of the revenge movie, Andy Vanya put in the end montage. After Curly Bill Brocious and Johnny Ringo are killed, we get a montage of Wyatt Earp's posse quickly murdering the remaining cowboys. The montage ends with Ike Clanton escaping by taking off his red sash, and Wyatt Earp ceases his pursuit. This montage was not in the script and did not occur in history. This was all Andy Vanya. For Doc Holliday's death scene, Val Kilmer filled the bed with ice. This made him pale and shiver in discomfort, which he felt added to his performance of a dying man. This film was a critical and box office success, but it was only a moderate success. Made on a budget of $25 million, it went on to make a respectable $56 million in North America. It may have gotten lost in 1993 amongst all the Hollywood blockbusters at the time. Mega hits like Jurassic Park, Sleepless in Seattle, Mrs. Doubtfire. We also had other hits in 1993 like Groundhog Day, The Fugitive, Schindler's List, and Last Action Hero. Tombstone just got lost in that shuffle. Most critics liked the film and saw it as a fun, guilty pleasure. The other Wyatt Earp movie starring Kevin Costner was released a few months later, ended up being a bomb. It had 3 times the budget at $63 million, but received mixed reviews and only made about $25 million at the box office. Tombstone was the clear winner of that matchup. Since then, Tombstone has gone on to become a huge cult classic, appealing to all generations, young and old. It is infinitely rewatchable, and Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday is considered a cinematic revelation. Tombstone is on every list of top westerns, competing with classics such as High Noon, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Unforgiven. It is inarguably one of the greatest westerns of all time.